Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Camp Bug Media. Josh here. Today we'll be continuing our Wrong Turn reviews with Wrong Turn 4. Bloody Beginnings, which released on DVD October 25th, 2011 and was written and directed by Declan O'Brien, who also directed Wrong Turn 3, Left for Dead. So the movie actually picks up in the past in 1974 at the Glenville Sanatorium, with Three Finger, Sawtooth, and One Eye having been captured. They're being experimented on, and people want to find out why they can't feel any pain. Eventually there's a bit of an altercation, and one of the patients manages to get a hair clip away from one of the doctors. They give the hair clip to Three Finger, and he's able to pick the lock of his cell, and they escape. After escaping, they get a hold of an orderly, throw him down on the ground, brutally bite his nose off and kill him. Then they proceed to go after the woman whose hair clip they stole earlier. They strap her down to a bed and start doing electric shock therapy on her. They turn it up to full blast and just shock her to death while she's peeing herself. It was honestly quite a gruesome opening scene, and it doesn't stop there. We then go over to the main doctor of the facility, who the three mutants have strapped up to this door. Each limb is attached to a different moving belt, and when they all start moving, it brutally rips each limb off one by one. You hear the bones crack and rip out of his legs and arms, and it really reminded me of the rack trap from Saw 3, where they had Buddy stuck in the trap and he couldn't move, and it slowly turned each of his limbs one by one until they snapped. It was super brutal, and they do it mostly practically, which is what I love about this kill. Each time you see one of the limbs ripping off, it's an actual prosthetic being ripped to pieces, and it looks so awful. They easily could have ruined this death with a ton of CGI, which we will see later on in the movie. But for this death and a lot of the opening deaths, they were practical and it was great. I really liked the opening of this movie. Probably one of the best openings of all of the Wrong Turn movies so far. So the movie jumps forward to 2003, probably a few months before the original Wrong Turn took place because there's a lot of snow. It's probably around January, February. There are a group of friends who plan on going on a skidoo trip in West Virginia. So they gather all their gear up, go to the location, and as they're trying to find the spot they're going to, they get lost, it starts snowing, so they decide to stop at the sanatorium they find, which also happens to be the sanatorium from the original. And this is also about the point in the movie where we get a reference to the title.
He's making a wrong turn, I know it.
So anyways, they go inside the sanatorium, they realize it's a little better kept up than it should be. They expected it to be freezing inside, and it honestly isn't that bad. Eventually they stumble upon a generator and they get the power up and going. This alerts Three Finger, Sawtooth, and One Eye to them being in the building. And at one point everyone's dancing in this room, and you can see, I think, Sawtooth standing on the other side of the glass staring at them all. And this is about when I started to get into my main issue with the movie. For as many characters as there are in this film, it doesn't seem like any of them are the main character. I kind of assumed it was going to be the black-haired girl who was constantly getting pissed off at the pranks and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time it was showing the girl who was having sex in the beginning just as much. And then there was also Sarah, who seemed like a really awesome character. So it was hard to really tell who was the main character because it seemed like nobody was the main character. It was very strange to watch this movie and kind of have nobody to root for because the group themselves kind of sucked. They weren't as bad as the group from Wrong Turn 3. They were slightly more likable than that, but I would say there are people in this group that are less likable than some of the people from Wrong Turn 3, so it's kind of a toss-up. So as they're all winding down to go to the bed for the night, the prankster guy of this movie decides to go off and explore. For some reason, everyone just decides to sleep with their door wide open, so as he's walking by, he's looking in at all the different characters. He stops by to watch the lesbian couple have sex. Something else that bothered me about this point in the movie was there is a ton of people this time around, maybe about the same as Wrong Turn 2, but probably more than Wrong Turn 3. And they're all together in the same spot, so when the mutants start coming after them shortly after the dance scene, why don't they all just stick together and go fight them? Because there's more than enough of them to be able to take on just three guys. There's only one of them that's actually really big, and then Three Finger and One Eye really are pretty small. They would have been able to take them on had they stuck together. One or two of them might have gotten killed in the fray, but still, they would have been able to survive. So after he's done creeping, he leaves to go explore, and we get the first kill from the main group. Sawtooth comes up and shoves a spike through the bottom of his neck and out through the top of his head. But what makes this cool kill is that you get a POV shot from the jokester guy as he's dying. You see him fall down from his eyes, and you see his vision slowly fade as he dies. It was a cool little idea to include in this movie. So the next morning they realize that the jokester guy is gone, so the group breaks up to go look for him. This is when his girlfriend discovers Sawtooth chopping up their friend who they were going to meet earlier in the movie. It actually reminds me a bit of a scene from Wrong Turn 1 where they have to hide underneath the beds while the mutants come in and are chopping up their friends and they have to be quiet as possible. It's a nice little tense scene where she has to hide in the kitchen behind one of the shelves as she's seeing her friend being chopped up in front of her. A nice throwback to the original movie in my opinion. She runs back to the group to tell them about what's going on, and this probably leads to the worst death in maybe the entire franchise. I haven't seen Wrong Turn 5 and 6 yet, but right now I'm calling this the worst because the stoner girl of the movie isn't paying attention and she backs up away from the group. They lower down some barbed wire above and lift her up by her neck, and she starts choking and there's blood spurting out, and her boyfriend runs up to try to save her. The idiot starts pulling on her legs and it results in a horrible CGI scene where her head gets ripped off. This is probably one of the worst CGI deaths I've ever seen. It literally looked like it was almost undone, like it just went from her head being on her shoulders to popping off her shoulders and her body falling. It was absolutely terrible. They could have done so much better with that death if they did it practically, and it made her boyfriend look like a total moron because he's the one who pulled her head off by pulling on her legs. And then not only that, he lays there in her blood for like 5 minutes screaming and staring at her head while everyone else is running away, and it just could have been a better death had they not just totally messed it up with CGI. So the remainder of the group freaks out and runs outside to the skidoos and tries to leave, and they realize that their skidoos have been sabotaged. One of the girls from the group decides to put on her gear and decide to walk to safety and try to get help for them. You would think this would result in some sort of scene where she gets a death off by herself in the woods, or maybe she gets help but brings them back and they get killed anyway, something like that. But it's a storyline that completely peters out. She just ends up freezing to death in the woods. It really was a disappointment, to be honest. So everyone decides to go back inside and defend themselves against the mutants rather than freezing to death outside.
We either freeze to death or we fight!
This leads the boyfriend of the girl who just went off by herself to get captured by the mutants. We get this huge sequence of him being strapped to a table and the mutants slowly peeling pieces of him off and boiling him and eating it. It's literally just like a 10-minute sequence of this guy screaming and the other characters trying to figure out whether or not they're going to save him. Eventually they decide to rush the mutants with some weapons. They end up getting them trapped in a cell, which happens to be their original cell from the first of the movie, which is kind of a coincidence if you ask me. They taunt the mutants and say they're going to kill them. The jokester guy goes against gas and plans on burning them alive, but he's talked out of it.
Kyle, don't do this.
Eventually, he's left to watch the mutants while the others go off and have some rest. He falls asleep and Three Finger ends up finding the hair clip from earlier in the movie in the cell that they're in. He uses the hair clip to get out of the cell. They end up getting their hands on the jokester guy and cutting his tongue out so that he can't speak. They put him inside a costume so that nobody could recognize who he is, and they send him after the girls. The girls, not knowing that this is the prankster guy, think that it's Three Finger in disguise, so they go after him with their knives and they super stab him to death, blood spurting everywhere. His back basically looks like a sink of blood for how many times they stabbed him. They flip him over and pull the mask off, and they realize they killed their friend. But there's no time to be sad because the other mutants are coming after them. So at this point in the movie, Sawtooth ends up with this comically huge drill, which does nothing but remind me of Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. So he starts running around with his Silent Night, Deadly Night drill and starts trying to kill off the remaining 4 women. Eventually they discover a grate that they can pull off of a window, and they try to dig their way out to safety because the windows are covered in snow. However, there's only so much time to get out because Sawtooth, Three Finger, and One Eye are banging at the door trying to get in. One by one they start getting out the snow tunnel, and then we're left with just the prankster guy's girlfriend, the redheaded girl. So just as she starts to go through the tunnel, it collapses on her and she has to back out and try again. But before she can try again, Sawtooth comes up behind her with a big drill and starts drilling the hell out of her. It goes right through her back and out her stomach. And he drills her for a good long while before he drops her. So our remaining 3 girls end up getting outside and they try to run for it, but the mutants come after them on their skidoos. They think they're gonna die, but then the mutants leave them alone. This leads the girls to thinking it's their chance to get away. However, one of the mutants comes back on the skidoo and slices the main girl in the back really bad. Sarah is forced to carry over to the tree line so that she's hidden from the other mutants while she goes off to look for her girlfriend Bridget.
Let's get you to the tree line, and then I'll go back through.
However, Bridget is having a bad day because the mutants have captured her. They've got her underneath a skidoo and they turn it on and start grinding up her stomach and her chest. There's pieces of guts and blood flying out from underneath the skidoo. It would have been a great kill, except they fall back into that same trap of using too much CGI. There's a bunch of CGI blood squirting in her face. In my opinion, it would have been better to just have a guy laying next to the skidoo that you can't see and have him squirting practical blood on her face rather than using that much CGI again.
No! Bridget!
As the main girl is running away, she sees a skidoo coming after her, and it turns out that it's Sarah who's taken Sawtooth's skidoo to save her. So the main girl gets on the skidoo and they're both really happy and they start driving away, and it's daytime, there's happy music playing. But as they're driving away, because they're not paying attention, they end up driving through a line of barbed wire which double decapitates them and sends their bodies flying off the skidoo. Definitely a surprising end for the movie to kill off both the 2 main characters like that. So as the movie ends, we see Sawtooth pull up in that old yellow truck from Wrong Turn 1. He collects the 2 severed heads of the babes, throws them in the back, and drives off into the end credits. So the kills are kind of a mixed bag in this movie. We had some really great kills at the start with Buddy getting his nose bit off, and then the girl getting electrocuted. and then the head doctor getting his arms and legs ripped off. But then as the movie went on and went back and forth between good kill, bad kill, good kill, bad kill, I would say overall the kills are like slightly better than Wrong Turn 3, but not as good as Wrong Turn 2. Something I like about this movie compared to Wrong Turn 3 is that we do get a lot of Three Finger in this movie, but there's also a lot of the other two mutants going on. Wrong Turn 3 suffered from just having one throughout the whole movie. He probably could have been easily killed had the prisoners and the cops teamed up together to go after him. Whereas at least this movie had 3 killers, and I still think they probably could have beat them had they all teamed up, but it made more sense that they would be able to be picked off one by one where there's 3 killers versus 1 killer from Wrong Turn 3. The acting in this movie is also kind of a mixed bag. Some of the actors are actually pretty good and better than the actors from Wrong Turn 2 and 3, but then on the same hand, we've got some of them that are worse than the actors from Wrong Turn 3, which is not a good thing. I actually really like the setting of the winter time. You don't get a lot of horror movies that are set in the winter, especially as much as this one is, so it was really cool to see everyone trapped in that snowy environment and having to survive. The makeup for the mutants looked pretty good. Sawtooth and One Eye looked great. They looked like little younger versions of themselves from Wrong Turn 3. However, Three Finger did look quite a bit different than he did in previous entries, which makes sense because Three Finger never really looks the same in all the movies. They switch him up just a little bit. All in all, I would say definitely give this one a watch if you like the Wrong Turn movies. It's a nice little prequel to the franchise. However, it's not going to be winning an Oscar anytime soon. I'm sure you know that going into these movies. I did like the storyline of the kids going on the skidoo trip and going to the sanatorium and meeting the mutants and getting the flashbacks to when they were younger and seeing what they were up to. I don't think it was quite as good of a storyline as Wrong Turn 3 or Wrong Turn 2. However, I think it was executed better than Wrong Turn 3 because Wrong Turn 3 had the potential to be really great with the prison bus crash, and it just kind of fell flat pretty much as soon as the movie started. Whereas at least this one was kind of fun throughout the movie, so I did like it a little bit more than Wrong Turn 3. I'd only seen this movie one time before seeing it for the review, and I gotta say, just like I did with the Wrong Turn 2 review, I like this movie a lot more than the first time I watched it. I don't know what it was, maybe I wasn't paying attention as much back then or something, but I honestly did have a lot of fun watching this movie, even though it's clearly not the best movie in the world. So what did you think of Wrong Turn 4 Bloody Beginnings? Let me know in the comment section down below. Coming up next, we got the review for Wrong Turn 5, Bloodlines. So stay tuned for that. Alright guys, until the next one, have a good one.